Welcome to the Edmonton region. We are standing right in the middle of some of the best agricultural land in Canada and in the furthest north major metropolitan area in North America. This provides us with some opportunities to do some things that most of the world doesn't have. As you can see behind us, we've got greenery and we've got abundance and we're ready to leverage it. I grew up on a farm in Alberta. We produce both livestock and plant protein, and we're good at it here. I'm really excited about talking to you about why I came back to this community and why I think there's a major opportunity for you to move forward into this economy. Edmonton has some of the best infrastructure in the area that anybody has in the world to actually leverage this. Right across the river is the University of Alberta. It's one of the top-ranked agricultural universities in the world, and I'm very happy to help you connect with both the innovation and the economic potential that this region has to offer. Let's go inside, talk a little bit more about some of the really great things that are happening in this province and right here in the Edmonton area and how we can help you be successful. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are hosting this event on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground and traveling route for the Cree Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. I imagine the original peoples who first made a home here over 14,000 years ago came and stayed for many of the same reasons we're talking here today. This land is fertile, the water is clean and rich, and the land is beautiful. The skies are clear, and there is an abundance of opportunity in this region. An appreciation and gathering place here has been fomented over the last several centuries that has made this a wonderful place to do business. This is a welcoming community that has brought many people together, and we're very happy to start talking to you about the opportunities that we see in this region. Let's jump right in. First of all, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Raminder Chima and the Executive Vice President for Operations in Agricorp, a leading global agri-commodity company trading and processing, and with annual revenues of over $3 billion US. Ram, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Trevor, and thanks Edmonton Global for having me here.
So Ram, you're one of the biggest global players in the plant protein space and have a very good understanding of where the market is going to be going into the future. Where do you see global demand shifting and changing?
Trevor, as far as I think strategically we are very much in alignment with the broader picture, and it's just a matter of fact that some of the continents, they are taking a front seat, and some of the continents are still on the back seat. But when I say on the back seat, does not mean that they're not doing anything or they're not aware of that. They are still working on it. It's just some of these limiting factors that are just keeping them on a back seat. And just to let you know about those, some of those factors are there can be some technological advancements, some of the resources availability. Then we have acceptability to the product, like how much people are accepting the product. Then there can be the background, like the cultural boundaries, where they feel that, you know what, they are still want to go with the traditional values. But I think with time, maybe by 5 to 10 years, within that time frame, this gap is going to be bridged in a very seamless way. So I feel that soon you will see a lot of these things coming up.
Agricorp has a global presence in 21 offices in 12 countries, and you sell to more than 30 different countries. Can you give us an overview of where Agricorp is already investing and where you see potential growth?
Well, it's almost, apart from trading, definitely, it's almost a couple of years now that we are in dry fractionation. So we are using yellow peas to take out the protein, starch, and fiber out of it. And I think a month and a half ago, we had a press release where we told everybody that we are soon going to be into SPI, which is your soy protein isolates. And phase 1 is going on right now. Hope to finish that in probably a month and a half time. And there are other plant-based protein projects that are in the pipeline. They're a little confidential at this time. I cannot say much about it. But what I feel is that definitely you will see a lot of these opportunities coming up and a lot of new players jumping in this field.
We've heard from the industry and the world in general that we have a great reputation for quality and product abundance. Can you speak a little bit, not just about the volume of products here, but why that quality is important to you?
Quality is very important to us. Definitely, wherever you feel that the food word is related, quality automatically jumps in. And I think just to give you a small example, I had been to a lot of places around the world, and I had looked into a lot of these players. Whenever we talk about Canada or states, or especially North America, a lot of people, the first thing that comes to their mind is quality. You know what, these guys are making quality. These guys are like on top of the quality, and especially dealing with CFIA, FDA, and FBI, some of their the safety aspects of the food, they are so strict and so stringent that you cannot just get away with that. So I think safety within North America is itself a culture. And as far as food safety and food handling and all those processes are concerned, I think North America can take a lead in there.
Yeah, and you know what? Safety is something we don't talk about enough in terms of food quality and what we can do here in the country. So with global demand...
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is something, and that is one of the reasons why Canadian or North American products are a little bit costlier as well, because when the safety aspect jumps to it, there's a lot of planning, a lot of documentation, and a lot of other aspect that jumps into it. So definitely it makes more sense.
Yeah, and this market's going to grow. Do you have a sense for what the future is going to be and what it's going to take for other companies to get into this market?
Yeah, I think the future, what I see a future is definitely into not only into yellow peas, but I see a future, a plant-based future into chickpeas, where people will start making flours, or they will start extracting proteins from chickpeas. Mung beans, fava beans is one of the upcoming thing as well. And what I see is that definitely with time, I see a lot of blending happening. So that blending can happen with respect to different kind of flours, different kind of commodities together, or it can be value addition to some kind of product. You know that we have recently launched pea-based paneer in Singapore, and those kind of things, especially if you see the meatless burgers and those kind of things, a lot of those things will be jumping on within these 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be some great opportunities for some blending coming forward here. Yeah. Thanks, Ram. We really appreciate your insight. If anyone has questions for Ram or any of our other panelists, please leave them to the end of the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to engage them as part of our roundtable event. We're going to be moving into our next panelist now, and our next guest is Julianne Curran, VP of Market Innovation with Pulse Canada. She leads the market development and innovation and support research strategies for the Canadian pulse industry and is really well connected to some of the trends and what's happening in regards to innovation in Canada. And I can tell you from past experience, Pulse Canada has done a great job for all of us. Julianne, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's jump right in with some questions here. The first one will be a really broad question. Where do you see Canada being really competitive in the plant protein space?
Well, first of all, we have a high volume production of raw materials. When it comes to peas in particular, we're a global leader in production, producing about 4 million metric tons annually. So it's not just the volume of these crops, but it's also the sustainable practices and the advances that our growers have made, including crop rotations, growing pulses in conjunction with other field crops to improve soil quality. A lot of these advances in production would not have been possible with the R&D investments that the industry has made. And I think that's another thing that makes us a global leader. Over the last 40 years, investments into breeding and agronomic research has really improved the quality of our raw product, as well as led us to the success that we've had in achieving high yields of crops. So all of those things make us extremely competitive from a production perspective. We've also seen here in Canada a lot of growth in our R&D capacity when it comes to pea fractionation and pulse ingredients. 15 years ago, The only pea ingredient processors globally were the ones that existed here in Canada. So because of that, a lot of the expertise has been built here within the Canadian academic community in order to support those processors, and as well as the others who've come online in the last decade. So with that new processing capacity that we're seeing and the growth, we're really on track now to having the largest pea processing sector globally. And I think that's the other thing that makes us competitive. Market analysts predict the demand growth for plant protein in the next 15 years will require even a lot more ingredient processing capacity than we have currently to support that demand. And so with investments being made through different initiatives in Canada, these companies, as well as more broadly in the capacity of our sector, I think we're going to be really well positioned to carve out a major slice of the plant protein pie here in Canada. And so I think all of those things are our advantages here as a potential to be a leader in this space.
Yeah, and I can't agree with you more. We've done a really, really good job of being leaders and innovative in this space. Can you talk a little bit more about where you see the innovation coming and developing in this industry?
Sure. So when you think about more established ingredients like soy protein and cornstarch, pulse-based ingredients are relatively new. And so there's a lot of work that has been done and is continuing to be done, looking at processing technologies and ingredient modifications to improve some of the attributes like flavor and functionality and performance of the ingredients. The other challenge is that these ingredients are being used mostly in plant-based food products like dairy and meat alternatives. And those product categories in and of themselves have a challenge to deliver to consumers with respect to taste, sensory properties. Consumers are expecting meat alternatives that brown like animal-based meats, cheese that melts, soft cheeses that spread. And so there's a great deal of R&D and innovation that's needed to be done by those end-use manufacturers, but also those ingredient processors that are supplying the ingredients to make those products. So all of that is really a focus, I think, right now. But I think what's coming next is looking at how we can improve and enhance the nutrition of these products, because that's another key driver for consumers. And Ram talked about the blending, and I think that's really where we have an opportunity to blend the ingredients together to really leverage their inherent nutritional compositions.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's lots that's really good about these crops, but they're new to people, and we got to do some work in terms of getting them on people's palates. Let's talk a little bit about the offtakes. Starch has been a major issue in the past in terms of getting this industry going, and there's been some major advancements in that front as well as the fiber. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening in Canada to develop the domestic market for offtakes?
Yeah, so I referenced the research investments, and particularly over the past 10 to 15 years, there have been public research investments here in Canada looking into the functionality and exploring end-use applications for those co-products of pulse fractionation and starch in particular, because such a high volume is generated when you split the seed. Right now, most of the pea starch is being used in feed and ethanol, but there is a lot of potential for use of the starch in higher value markets. For example, industrial applications like bioplastics, adhesives, pharmaceuticals. And so there is, again, more innovation and R&D required to further explore these opportunities. And again, both the provincial and federal government through research funding programs have taken note of this challenge that is facing Canadian processors and are focusing investments to address this. In particular, at Pulse Canada, where we do market development for the Canadian industry, we've incorporated a focus on outreach to industrial manufacturers in our market development program so that we can educate them on the opportunities to use these pea starch ingredients and perhaps focus on some of the unique functionalities that they have. One thing just to think about is that Canada, I think, has a real opportunity in this space to become a leader in pea starch processing and high value usage potential, because this is really similar if you look at what's happened with cornstarch historically, and the US being a leader in that space. I think we have the potential to do that here with pea starch.
Yeah, and
And I
knowing
think,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, Travis, just to add to Julian's comment, because usually we have this issue with starch as well. And I think Julian is very much right. Some sort of platforms need to be built in by the government or by the agencies, whether they wanted to bring on the universities or a different kind of platform where people can sit down and explore more about this. And definitely, I think this has to be communicated properly to the manufacturer and to the end users as well. And I think that's the reason why I think a lot of work still needs to be done on this front.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's going to be some huge opportunities as we start to understand what these products are really going to be able to be used for. And we're really just at the beginning of that curve right now. So it's very exciting. Thanks, Julianne. And thanks, Ram, for contributing to the dialogue there. That was great. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you both at the round table here. You can see from a feedstock innovation standpoint that Canada really is a world leader. And we've been doing this for over 40 years now. So we have a great deal to celebrate in terms of what we've been able to create. But none of that would do any good if we aren't able to export our products to a global market. Our next guest is from the Port of Prince Rupert. Jeff Stromdahl is the Manager of Trade and Development. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
So I've been in business a bit myself. I know how important freight is in logistics, and I got to tell you, the ports that we have on the West Coast have done a very good job. I'm very excited to talk to you. So first, let's address the elephant in the room. We're talking about Edmonton and ports, and we're landlocked. Can you talk to us about the connection between the Edmonton region and the Port of Prince Rupert?
Yeah, absolutely, Trevor. I mean, really, the Port of Prince Rupert, as cheesy as this may sound, considers ourselves to be the Port of Alberta because of our proximity and reach. I mean, we're only 1 day rail transit time from Edmonton. And so linking the Port of Prince Rupert and Edmonton is Canada's greatest Class 1 rail, CN. Over the past 5 years, I think CN has had capital investments that have largely outpaced all other Class 1 rail providers in North America. A significant amount of these investments were put into improving fluidity in the corridor and specifically for the Prince Rupert Gateway. Ultimately, Edmonton is a key origination of Canadian exports, which are valued overseas. Both Ram and Julianne have spoke about the quality before. I'll speak a little bit more about quality a bit later, I think. But which are everything from agricultural products to petrochemical to forestry in terms of the exports coming out of Alberta through the Port of Prince Rupert.
I know from my own business perspective, we've had some very big successes that have been generated through your port. Can you talk a little bit more about what your advantages are in some of those global market perspectives?
Yeah, so the Port of Prince Rupert is Canada's third largest port and North America's fastest growing port. We're a diversified port with multiple bulk terminals and a world-class container facility. In terms of our natural advantages, we sit on the deepest natural harbor in North America, while also being North America's closest port to Asia. Currently at the Fairview Container Terminal, we have 4 weekly container services from all 3 alliances. We're one of only 2 terminals in North America that has all 3 alliances calling a single terminal. This ultimately means greater choice for the shipper. Another advantage is our capacity. Fairview Container Terminal's capacity is currently at 1.35 million TEUs, or 20-foot equivalent units. However, at this time, we're currently undergoing expansion up to 1.6 million TEUs by Q4 2022, and then yet again up to 1.8 million TEUs by Q4 2023. And actually, lastly, specifically to the intermodal line of business, I'd say it's the Port of Prince Rupert's ability to build an unparalleled intermodal ecosystem, we've been able to do things that no other gateway in North America can do, like the construction of our connector corridor, for example, providing a direct private link between the terminal and our logistics providers. This in turn is more efficient, less costly for shippers who choose to use the Port of Prince Rupert.
Yeah, and from my own experience, that intermodal shipping is just critical for us to get into those value-added markets globally. So let's talk a little bit more about the growth that you guys have been experiencing. It's very well deserved. Tell me a little bit more about what's been driving that.
Yeah, Trevor. So in 2020, which we all know was a very unique year, the Port of Prince Rupert was still able to see volumes grow by 9% for a total of roughly 32 million tons of cargo handled through the port. Specifically speaking about agricultural products, Prince Rupert has two facilities which contribute to the movement of agri products. Prince Rupert Grain is our bulk terminal, which ships about 6 million tons annually with an annual throughput capacity of, let's call it roughly 8 million tons. And additionally, Raymont Logistics is currently handling unit trains of agri product where they're transloading them into containers at the port, which equates to roughly 1 million tons of capacity. And they're handling everything from wheat and canola to peas and lentils at that facility.
Yeah, it's really critical what you guys are doing. So one of them, if you had to say just a couple things to farmers and to producers in the ag sector, what are the most important things you want them to get to understand about the Port of Prince Rupert?
In general, it's important to understand that agri will remain a primary export from Western Canada, feeding the rest of the world. However, the future of agri exports truly is containerization, particularly for plant-based proteins. Containerization improves access, customer reach, geographic reach, and product integrity, going back to the quality of the Canadian product that's already been mentioned, thereby giving small, medium, and large shippers more resiliency and diversification. No longer does one need to order 30,000 tons of one singular product. Shippers can now sell as little as one container to a landlocked customer, where that was never possible before, ultimately giving shippers greater control of their supply chains. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Ridley Island Export Logistics Project, which the Port of Prince Rupert, along with DP World and Raymont Logistics, are looking to create a much larger export transload facility to handle over 8 million tons of containerized exports. The facility is targeted to handle agri products, including plant-based proteins, forestry products, resins, and a handful of other commodities. So yeah, I would just kind of wrap that up with saying that this represents a significant capacity and compelling value to shippers. So please don't hesitate, anyone on the call, to reach out to me if you want some more information about this truly transformational product.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I've heard that from many companies that the containerized shipping is a great way to build out a market. You don't need a whole bunch of volume anymore to actually start breaking into some of these sectors. So just a reminder to everybody that we're going to leave our Q&A questions till the very end of the panel. And thanks again, Jeff, for everything that you've contributed. This was a very good and useful conversation, not just for pulse proteins, but for everything. And we're pretty confident that we've got a good value proposition for this sector in general. But every investor's needs, as you know, are very different, and every plan is a bit unique. So with that, I'm going to flip it over to my colleagues, Chris and Jeff, who will share a little bit of how Edmonton Global is working to support your business plans for investment in extraction.
Thanks, Trevor. I'm here with Jeff Bell, who leads our research and data team. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this tool. So you built a model that's really going to help international investors understand the numbers behind why they should invest in the Edmonton metropolitan region in plant protein fractionation. Can you tell us a bit about the model?
Yeah, what we're trying to do with the model is do something a little different. We're using a very collaborative approach where we partner with the investors. We invite them to provide key data points relevant to their question. We bring our data to the equation, and we combine that into a unique product that would be unavailable elsewhere.
Okay, so I really like that. So we're layering their data with our data to give them a much richer insight than what they normally have. So what kind of data are we talking about? Is it just like the availability? Is it specific products? What is it?
It's anything that's relevant to the business decision, I would say. So that includes things like taxes, and it includes things like feedstock input costs, output prices, utility costs, shipping costs, anything that's of interest.
So it's pretty comprehensive.
It's pretty comprehensive.
Okay, so and is this just about the region, or can we compare or maybe use examples of other communities?
Yeah, I mean, this would be a good time maybe to speak to some work we did recently where we compared some peer jurisdictions here in the Canadian Prairies, Winnipeg and Saskatoon in this case. Yeah. And you can see here by looking at the numbers that Edmonton does compare pretty favorably to these jurisdictions. And what's driving these benefits in this case are transportation costs, because in this case we chose an Asian market, right, where we have an advantage here in Edmonton, low taxes, and of course feedstock availability.
Yeah, we've got a crazy amount of feedstock.
Yeah.
And if you're shipping out to Asia, all of it comes through here anyway.
That's right.
Is this just about Canadian? Like you talk, we think Winnipeg, we think Saskatoon, we think Edmonton.
So the tool does let us compare also to North American jurisdictions, but it's not global at this point.
Okay, and again, the Port of Prince Rupert is our primary port, but you can kind of pick where you want to ship it out.
Yeah,
from.
yeah. Any North American port you can model.
Okay, so I think that'd be really helpful. So again, when we think about this, it's not just that we've got data, companies have data. So when we bring these together, how much detail are you looking for? Do companies need to sign, or should they be signing NDAs with us? What's our protection around privacy?
Yeah, so confidentiality goes without saying. We're not going to share any data that people entrust with us. Prospective investors can share as little data as they want or as much data as they want. Obviously, the more they're willing to share, the richer picture we can paint for them. But really, I think everyone knows numbers matter. Edmonton Global knows numbers matter. Investors know numbers matter. So what we're really trying to do here is let the numbers speak for themselves. We're confident enough in our value proposition that if we show them the numbers, they're going to come to Edmonton.
Yeah, I love that. And looking at other places that are doing this kind of work, we've really tried to be proactive and aggressive at positioning our region. I think this is a fairly unique approach. Like, is anyone else that you know of, or how are we actually doing this?
Yeah, I think, again, the key word is collaboration. Yeah. I think we want to try to partner with our prospective investors instead of it having to be like a one-sided relationship. Yeah. And as far as I know, this is a unique approach. I'm not aware of other peer jurisdictions doing this.
Okay, love it. So if someone wants to look at the tool, if they want to play with the numbers, what do they do next?
I'm glad you asked that. I would invite anyone who's watching this webinar today to reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to work with them, try to understand their particular circumstances and opportunity that they're looking at, and work with them to see if Edmonton region is the right region for them.
Okay. So any final thoughts on the data and the numbers?
Numbers matter, and numbers speak for themselves.
Okay, Trevor, with that, the numbers are going to speak themselves. Back to you.
Thanks, Chris and Jeff. And really, really good information. Jeff's done a very, very good job of pulling together some very vital statistics for the ag sector in terms of what we can do in this industry. Our next panelist has got some very interesting and exciting products right here from the Edmonton region. Ahmadiyyah is the president and co-founder of Viability Foods, and a growing company here in the region that is producing both plant-based meats, cheeses, and a pretty phenomenal line of cheesecake, which is going to be a lot better than the lentils I used to feed my kids in their hamburgers. So Ahmad, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Ahmad, can you give us a bit of an overview of who Viability is as a company?
Sure, yeah. Viability is actually Arabic for plant-based, and I founded Viability Foods with my partner and wife, Ahmadiyyah, as a plant-based food technology company, creating mouth-watering plant-based foods. It really represents who we are and what we do, and that's making mouth-watering plant-based foods that brings people together sharing stories at the dinner table, and enjoying making better choices for their health and the planet. And the idea here is to create a company that makes plant-based foods that you can indulge in, making animal proteins obsolete.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, as I said, I used to have to sneak this into my kids' diets, and I really appreciate companies like you making this a lot easier. Can you talk a little bit about your recent growth? You've recently been overfunded through a raise. What has that meant to your growth as Nabati?
So we actually have been growing quite well before that raise, and we hit a ceiling, so we needed to raise capital. And that recent capital raise was our very first and major one, and it was a phenomenal success. It really means that we can drive significant growth for the company, but also for the community. As we build new facilities and hire more people, we're basically on hiring spree. We're now able to really dedicate resources to market expansion in the US. We export our products there. We market and enter the EU market, further capacity expansion in Edmonton, as well as really put resources towards R&D, developing new innovative products like our liquid plant-based eggs that we're launching very soon, late this summer. We're really pushing forward in terms of growth, and you can find like our dairy-free cheesecakes in Hong Kong right now, in Puerto Rico, in Sainte Croix, all over across the US. So we're really using this growth to drive further growth. And we're looking forward to the next few years.
It's very impressive how much you've been able to grow globally already, right here from in the Edmonton region. If we get a fractionation facility going here, what can you tell us about what kind of offtake you'd be able to generate?
So I want to make it clear that we actually really need fractionation capabilities here in Edmonton and in Alberta. Right now, we import quite a bit of stuff. So our pea protein texturized comes in from France. And we get a few things from Europe. We don't want to go through Asia. We want really quality ingredients. And as these capabilities come up here in Canada, we've been just evaluating suppliers. And we want a certain grade. So everybody that processes pea protein or any type of protein or starches or fiber, it's as I understand it, it's a specific process to that facility, and we have certain criteria that we need when it comes to our products. Our products are really designed; they're just not formulated. We really need that capability here, as well as customization from the facilities. I believe the local market includes Nabati, and there is demand, and the demand right now may be small for innovative plant proteins such as lupin, but we really need that. We can only, for example, get lupin protein from one supplier globally in Netherlands. We grow lupin here, so there is demand for it. There's forecasted demand. I think the local market, there's a huge opportunity for it here.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. And there's going to be a huge amount of opportunity that comes out locally. One of the things that I see coming from the ag sector myself is there's going to be a whole bunch of other crops that are going to offer some potential for us in this industry as well. Do you see anything else beyond peas, beans, and lentils on the horizon?
Yes, and I mentioned that just earlier, lupin protein. That's really grown in Australia. You get it from India, Egypt, but rarely processed across the board. So it's kind of just like peas, but also can be grown here in Alberta. So we need to just branch out of what's traditional, what's been done before. Soy is very common, but it's an allergen. Peas, the same thing. It's not an allergen, but everybody uses it. So if you're looking to do something new and innovative, like plant-based chicken, you need a protein that is more white. You can color, you can do more with it, and that means exploring other pulses to fractionate and offer in the market.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear what you're talking about with lupins. We started working on that crop, as you know, probably almost 20 years ago now, and there is a very exciting future for the region and some major sustainability advantages. So from an innovation standpoint, What do you think is going to be the next thing on the plant-based food production side from your perspective?
So the next, in terms of value-added products, that's plant-based liquid eggs. So you have the meat alternatives, there's the cheese alternatives, but really a category that hasn't been developed very well. There's only 2 companies worldwide that produce a liquid plant-based eggs, and that's in the US. We're going to be the 3rd, and we're Canadian. And that's huge. And after that, there's the seafood aspect of it, the seafood category. And I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and as you probably know, we've got some really, really good resources here for companies like you to support you in that innovation stage. And the liquid eggs isn't something I even really thought about. So kudos to you for actually, mining into that so deeply and coming up with some really cool ideas about what the future can look like. So thanks, Ahmad. That's really interesting, and I will be coming by for some cheesecake at some point in time. And I'm sure we'll have more questions for you on the roundtable. Our next panelist is Scott Exner, an agriculture and food lawyer with MLT Aikens, who has been included as one of the top 50 most influential individuals in the Canadian agricultural scene. Scott sits on the board of the Plant Protein Alliance of Alberta, and so again, he's not just got a good understanding of agriculture, but about what's happening in the industry as a whole. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Trevor.
So you've been involved in this industry for a very long time, 30 years, and you've seen some of the really significant changes that we've been able to make from an innovation perspective. From a high level, can you talk a little bit about what you see coming in the plant protein industry in Western Canada, and talk a little bit more about what that plant protein supercluster means to the Canadian industry?
Yeah, and certainly we've been shipping grain for over 100 years out of Canada. We had one major change in the industry in the 90s. We closed down small wooden elevators, built concrete facilities. Saw a lot of foreign investment. I see this as our second major change in the industry in the last 30 years. And what spurred that is the federal government a few years ago had a report done by Dominic Barton, who's our current ambassador to China, about how can we invigorate the Canadian economy. Food and agriculture was one of those areas he identified. We traditionally exported grain. Now we want to process it more. So out of that, the federal government set up a supercluster fund, $980 million, intended to spur different industries. It selected 5 industries in Canada, one of them being plant-based protein processing. They awarded $152 million to Protein Industries Canada, which is our protein supercluster. That's matching money, meaning that if companies want to apply for some of those funds, they come up with their own matching dollars. That means we'll have at least $300 million invested in the industry in the next 5 years, and that's before we talk about any other investment and any other debt financing as well. So lots of investment going in there right now in the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I agree. It's great to see the Canadian government supporting this. We've been good as a region for a very long time at producing raw commodities. And it's really nice to see that support in terms of taking that next step into this food industry. That's going to be more critical as we move forward. So you've put a lot of deals together in the agricultural sector, both between investors and multinational companies and producers. What are some of the ways companies can work with producers to develop this opportunity?
And a lot of times when we do these projects, whether we're dealing with a local group or we're dealing with a multinational, we often talk about 3 things that companies are looking for from producers: looking for their grain, a lot of times looking for their cash, and also looking for their local connections. A lot of times it's important to lock up that supply of grain. We've entered into contracts with large companies, with local producers to do that. Certainly producers are more willing to do that if they have a chance to invest in the opportunity as well. So a lot of times we've mixed that with an investment. And then plus the local knowledge, what's the rail traffic like? We try to make sure we're using the rail system as efficient as possible. So when we ship stuff through the Prince Rupert port, it's done in an efficient manner. So lots of ways to work together. We've done deals where we've had as little as, let's say, 10 producers involved, all the way up to 1,800, depending on the volume we're looking for. And sometimes we're almost reverse engineer the business plan where we try to secure that volume of grain in advance and try to make a successful business out of it.
Yeah, and I know from my own experience, producers are eager for new markets for their products, and this is going to be really critical. So in the plant protein sector, We're seeing a whole range of international, local investors becoming aware of these opportunities. What type of investments do you see being the most attractive and most sensible for this region?
Certainly, we're seeing a lot of research right now. We've got a lot of small companies that have been developing products but need to expand. Ahmad's talked about how Nabati has expanded with some capital. That's certainly been there. The one thing about our super cluster, when we do apply for money, have to form a consortium. That's sort of forced companies to talk to each other. We've had a lot of networking events in the last 3 years here in Alberta, particularly with the Plant Protein Alliance of Alberta. We've connected the entrepreneurs with investors, not only local investors, but international. We've also brought a major protein conference to Canada for the first time in 2019. So lots of opportunity. Certainly it's important to connect with this group. And one of the things we've done is sort of allow networking opportunities for that. It's incredible how much we've expanded those networking things in the last few years.
Yeah, it's we're going to be really critical that we all connect here. And one of the things that the provincial government has tried to really push is making it easier for businesses to actually do business here. And they've just announced a red tape reduction initiative. How do you see that helping getting industry going here in Alberta?
Yeah, I've been working with the provincial government on that. They set up different panels for different sectors, including food and ag, part of that panel. And two areas where I want to focus on for our grain industry. First was foreign investment, reducing sort of the time it takes to sort of obtain any provincial approvals. And the provincial government's been working hard at that to cut, that wait time down by months. Secondly, the thing we were working on was when we are involving investors or producers as investors, what's the chance for them to have liquidity? So we've been working with the Alberta Securities Commission on improving ways to have liquidity to encourage that local investment. So both I see as positive in terms of developing the industry here in Alberta.
Yeah, and crops look great here. So I think producers are going to be looking at some of these investments a lot more favorably, and they're doing a very good job of getting their crop production out there. Thanks, Scott. I think your perspective on the business side and getting the investment side going is going to be really critical moving forward here into the future. And so with that, I think I'd like to bring it all back to our panelists for a bit of a roundtable discussion and hear a little bit more from our audience in terms of what some of the opportunities are and get your questions addressed. Feel free to enter any questions you have for our panelists, and we'll try and get to them the best that we can. So we're going to kick this off for a question for Ram. After hearing the other panelists, what should we be paying attention to?
I think definitely some of the aspects that we should pay attention is to ensure that the resources are available. Like as I had been to Edmonton and I met you and other team members there as well. So the grant is there from the government. So we've got to ensure that the facilities, sit down with the government, make sure that crafted program can be initiated with respect to a manufacturer's requirement. So those kind of things has to be, those dots needs to be connected so that there is an engagement between the manufacturer and the suppliers, those kind of things. Definitely these platform needs to be defined in a better way. And I think when I was in Edmonton, I think Edmonton Global is doing really a good job in sort of crafting those kind of customer requirements or manufacturer requirements to ensure that the business can be developed in Edmonton.
Yeah, and you're right. That relationship between the manufacturer and supplier is absolutely critical. If we don't do that properly, we just don't actually get the kind of value that we need out of the market.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that the government grants are there. You just take it the way you guys are doing it, dealing in crafting and sitting down with the manufacturer to ensure that that bonding and that requirement is there. I think that plays a very critical part.
Yeah, thank you. So we have another very good question here from Meswar. He's a practicing food scientist here in the city of Edmonton, and he's interested in learning more about the chemical safety of plant proteins and how industry and research institutes are handling the issue of anti-nutritional factors for even toxic chemicals in legumes. And there are a few of those out there, like what there is with any plant. So that's a wonderful question. And I'll turn it over to the panelists to see if anybody wants to take a stab at that question.
I guess I'll just kick it off by, speaking about anti-nutritional factors in particular. This is something that there has been a lot of academic research exploration into to better understand sort of the impact of different processing conditions on those anti-nutritional factors, including projects that are published, but also projects that are currently underway. So there is work in the academic community to explore that in particular.
Yeah, and I agree. It's the crop has some fantastic opportunities, and there's a lot of different things that we're going to be doing in the future. And there's already many different ways to actually make these crops work in different industries that are, I think, very exciting and opening up some big doors right away here.
Yeah, I mean, if nobody else has anything to add to this question, I would say even when we're talking about heavy metals, pesticide residues, this is something that the Canadian Grain Commission monitors for, and other quality attributes of pulse crops. Obviously, producer groups are looking at quality attributes of different crop varieties, and then ingredient processors are going to be testing their products as well.
Yeah, and you're right. Like CFIA runs a very, very strict chip and does a very, very good job with the food industry here. And I think it's actually a major asset for us to actually have that tool available for us. We've got another. Go ahead.
Trevor, the one thing I'll add with Protein Industries Canada, certainly when they encourage consortiums to look at issues, a lot of them are research and development. So we're looking at these issues and tackling them with some federal money. So certainly there's opportunity there to sort of tackle some of those problems and find new solutions.
Yeah, thank you. So we have another great question for you guys on the food quality standpoint. This came in anonymously, and they asked a question about the novel functionality of pea starch. So Julianne or Scott, or Ram, anybody have any answers for that?
Well, I'll just start off by saying this is the big question. What is the novel functionality of pea starch? And if we knew fully the answer to that question, I think we'd be a lot further along with the usage of starch. This is something where, again, as I mentioned, research and innovation is required. We've seen some glimpses of opportunities in certain applications. I mentioned some of those bioplastics, adhesives, pharmaceuticals, but again, it's something that needs to be sort of further explored and investigated, because we may have seen something in one particular project, but it's something that the industry is really looking at now.
And just to add to Julian's comment, I think as far as the concentrates are concerned, I think majority of the starch is still going to pet food industry. But as far as isolates are concerned, I think as Julian said, yeah, definitely quite a lot of research has been happening. But to bridge that gap, I think we need to be more active, and more participation is required from all the parties. And I think with respect to isolate, still the starch is going to China. So that needs to be conserved within North America by initiating these type of value addition products.
Yeah, and I can tell you too, from some of the companies that I've talked to, they're already active doing research from a commercial perspective on starch very quietly. And a lot of them have told me that they're very excited about pea starch right now. So I think we will see some demand coming on that we didn't even anticipate over the coming years here. We have another question from Andrew. And Andrew was asking a question about the market for pea protein and co-products right here in the Edmonton area. Is there any other additional developments? And Ahmed, you've done a really good job of setting the stage locally for some of these products. Is there other opportunities that you guys see coming out locally? I'll take a stab at that one. I do, actually. So I come from the oil and gas industry for a little while there, and I do see some fit for some of those products in a very big way. I did mention that there's lots of R&D that's happening behind closed doors right now. And I do think that both in the pet food industry and some other sectors, we're going to see demand with some of these products actually explode, probably much more quickly than people realize here over the coming years, just based on the size and scope of some of the companies that are actively prospecting in this space. Another question here?
I can just add on to that too, just one additional thought, that we always think about the categories like the milk alternatives, dairy alternatives, and the meat alternatives for these plant protein ingredients. But the bakery category also holds a lot of potential. So these protein ingredients can be substituted for skim milk powder, other animal-based proteins, and so I think that's another. And I'm not too familiar with the product manufacturing capability in the region, but that's something else that there may be potential there in Alberta.
Yeah, and we did have some early adopters in Alberta in the plant protein space and in the starch space for dealing with gluten intolerance. So lots of innovative history here in the region. We have a question from Christian, and this is for Jeff. What are the current containerization capabilities in the Edmonton region?
Sorry, Trevor, current containerization, is that what you said there?
Yeah, current containerization capabilities right here in the Edmonton region.
Yeah, so there are a few different transloaders in the Edmonton region currently. I mean, CN, their Western operations are based out of Edmonton, so there's fantastic connectivity to the Port of Prince Rupert. Really right now when you're looking at containerization, you've either got source load or port load. In a market where we haven't seen source load, so say in Edmonton or further east and south, where we haven't seen that growing. Again, that project I referenced, the Ridley Island Export Logistics Project, that's really to grow the port load, the port load containerization efforts here at the Port of Prince Rupert.
Ahmed, do you have something to add to that comment? You're still on mute.
Sorry, I wanted to actually ask if you can repeat the previous question, because I seem to have gotten just a lag and delay. So when I reconnected, you were just talking. So
okay. No problem. So a really good question actually for you to bring in, because you're already successful with Europe. There was a good question that came in talking about containerization right here in the Edmonton region. Has that been something that's influenced your business?
No, but it will be, because we're looking at now exporting on a container load basis to Europe and potentially to Japan. We'll see in the next 2 months. But it is something where we're looking at right now. So I can't really talk too much about it. But.
Yeah, no problem. So we have another question here. This is another one for you, Ahmed. How do you think securing domestic pea production supply from an industry that is largely full of new entrants is going to affect you? And new protein producers typically require firm offtake to support credit from their new builds. How do you approach a buyer right now?
So, how do I approach it? Well, I'll start with the first part of the question. The more entrants there is, the better. The more competition, the better the price would be. That's great. We love that. But really, what matters after that is that that drop in price helps us compete on the market with other producers that may be at a larger scale. So it's even better if we can source from somebody in Edmonton. So we're not waiting. The lead times are not like 30 days, maybe just a few weeks or 2 weeks, even less. But I think it really helps us and become more competitive, especially based in this region, especially in addition to being an exporter. So you're competing in a different market. If we're exporting to the EU, well, we're competing with local producers of value-added products over there that source locally as well. So we want to be competitive, and to do that, we have to source locally.
Yeah, I agree. I think when we have local supplies coming online, it's going to open up some very, very big doors for us. So we have another good question. I'm going to direct this one primarily at Scott and Ram. There was a question in from Kashmir about what you guys think the role of genetically modified plants is going to be in this industry moving forward.
Certainly, we've seen some companies focus on that and almost base their marketing strategy on that. I've got a few looking at that right now. So I think some people are feeling that's a niche area rather than just having the large scale fractionation plants. So that's certainly, I think people are focused, certain folks are focused on that and see that as a growth area.
I think one of the other reasons why pea protein is still in market or still considered a very favorable product is because of the fact that it is still non-GMO. Allergen, I mean, yeah, it's a tough question, but you know what? People have started getting away from all kind of allergens, and that is one of the reasons pea industry is gaining more momentum.
Yeah,
I would add to this too. I think that this has been thus far one of the advantages that the pulse industry has had. Not being a genetically modified plant, but it's one of the challenges also because it's, as we talked about, sort of all of the sort of issues or I guess challenges with functionality, etc. We have to work a bit harder to overcome those. Takes a bit longer.
Yeah, I agree. It's there's lots of advantages to biotechnology, but the fact that we don't have them in pulses is not a disadvantage either at this point in time. So lots of exciting things that are going to come out of that. One of the questions here that's come up that's near and dear to my heart is we talk a lot about business viability from a financial perspective, but there are lots of other factors that contribute to a business being viable. Can any of you guys comment on some of the other factors that you see that are really going to be essential to the growth of this industry?
I can start off and just, I mentioned this, throughout a lot of my responses to the questions, but the role of the local research community, governments, I think it's a collaboration between these different groups to grow the industry. And so ensuring that the research community, the academic community, as well as government investments are really closely aligned with the needs of the industry, I think is going to be critical to the growth.
Trevor, I would add, I think investment in transportation. We obviously have a great transportation system to begin with, but have certainly seen new transloading facilities being developed to sort of assist with it. So I think that'll certainly lead into the expansion of the containers as well. So, and the fact that we've got kind of the entire Western Canada talking about this, and particularly in the Edmonton region, I think has certainly helped.
And I think apart from that, all these are the availability of all the resources and what everybody just said, that the transportation logistically and end markets and how we are going to bridge up this gap, all these factors along with, I think definitely one of the interesting part is going to be if the governments will start making some sort of consortium with these upcoming players as they did with PIC and all other projects. So I think that will also make a big impact for everybody who wants to join into this.
Yeah, I agree. We've got a really bright future here. So with that, we're going to wrap up the session and close things off. I hope you guys all enjoyed the discussion and you guys became a little bit more aware of some of the opportunity we see in this plant protein space. Thank you for spending time with us and sharing your perspectives. Thank you to the trade commissioners across the world that helped coordinate this and send the message out about what's going on in the Edmonton region. And we'll watch for you, and we'll be promoting this event on our website and other venues as well. And watch for your email with some recording for some follow-up. We'll also be going live on social media and on a bunch of topics here later today. And Chris from our team will be talking to a number of folks about the programs and funding that exist to support this sector. Be sure to follow Edmonton Global on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and be notified when we go live. If you do have another question that the webinar didn't answer, we are available and are connected to our panelists, and we'd be happy to address anything that you have outstanding. So our modeling tool is available for you to use and to learn more of. feel free to please send me an email, and I welcome the opportunity to introduce you to the community that we have here in the Edmonton region and to talk more about the opportunity. And once again, once travel restrictions are lifted, it'd be wonderful to see you and introduce you to this community and show you what we have to offer. We really do think we are on the frontier of a big opportunity, and we're very proud of what we're going to be capable of doing. Thanks again for taking the time to attend this session, and take care.